or in December 1946, just 16 months after the end of World War II. The world is exhausted, broke, demobilizing. Millions of soldiers are returning home. Military budgets are being slashed. The United States Navy is decommissioning ships as fast as it can process them. And in this climate of demilitarization and austerity, the U.S. Navy launches the largest Antarctic expedition in history. 13 ships, 4,700 men, 25 aircraft, enough supplies for an 8-month mission, the equivalent of several $100 million in today's money, all headed for the most hostile, remote, uninhabited continent on Earth. The official purpose? Scientific research and training exercises, mapping coastlines, testing equipment in extreme cold, establishing American presence in Antarctica. But here's what makes this suspicious. The mission was organized in just 2 months. The expedition was led by Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd, America's most famous polar explorer, a national hero, but also a 58-year-old man being pulled out of semi-retirement for one more mission. The task force included military personnel from every branch, massive firepower, and technology that seemed excessive for scientific research. And most puzzling of all, the expedition was cut short. Scheduled for 8 months, Operation Highjump returned after just 8 weeks. Ships limping, back damaged, aircraft lost, men reporting strange encounters that would be buried in classified files for decades. The official explanation? Bad weather, equipment failures, mission objectives achieved early. But the rumors started immediately and have never stopped. Rumors of secret Nazi bases hidden in Antarctic caverns, of advanced technology discovered beneath the ice, of encounters with craft that moved in ways that defied physics, of Admiral Byrd being debriefed for hours by Pentagon officials and told never to speak publicly about what he'd seen. Tonight, we're going to examine Operation Highjump, what we know for certain, what we can reasonably infer, and what remains stubbornly, tantalizingly mysterious about the largest military expedition to Antarctica in history. Because the documented facts alone are strange enough, and the questions those facts raise have never been satisfactorily answered. To understand Operation Highjump, we need to understand both Antarctica itself and the man chosen to lead the expedition, Richard E. Byrd. Antarctica, the last frontier. In 1946, Antarctica was the least explored landmass on Earth. Larger than Europe, covered by ice up to 3 miles thick, with temperatures reaching minus 80 degrees Celsius. It was a brutal, alien environment that had killed numerous explorers who'd attempted to conquer it. But it was also strategically important. During World War II, both Allied and Axis powers had considered Antarctica's potential value as a weather observation point affecting global patterns, as a potential site for secret bases far from enemy observation, as unclaimed territory that could be exploited for resources, as a strategic position for future conflicts. Germany had been particularly interested in Antarctica. Between 1938 and 1939, the Nazis conducted an expedition to the region they called New Swabia, a section of Queen Maud Land. They photographed thousands of square miles of territory, dropped flags with swastikas claiming the land for Germany, and according to some reports may have established a seasonal base. This wasn't paranoia or conspiracy theory. It was documented German activity. The expedition happened. The territorial claims were made. And after the war, Allied intelligence took reports seriously that Germany might have established secret facilities in remote locations, including potentially Antarctica. Admiral Richard E. Byrd, Richard Evelyn Byrd, was, in 1946, one of America's most celebrated heroes. A naval aviator who'd made his name in polar exploration, he'd led multiple expeditions to Antarctica in the 1920s and 1930s. In 1926, he claimed to be the first to fly over the North Pole, though this claim is disputed. In 1929, he was the first to fly over the South Pole. This achievement is verified. He established Little America, a base on the Ross Ice Shelf. He spent 5 months alone at an advanced weather station, nearly dying from carbon monoxide poisoning. He pioneered aerial photography and mapping of Antarctic terrain. Byrd was a skilled navigator, an experienced commander, and crucially, he had the public profile to generate support for expensive Antarctic expeditions. He was also a Navy officer with significant intelligence connections. By 1946, Byrd was 58 years old and had retired from active polar exploration. He'd served in administrative roles during World War II. He was writing books, giving lectures, and enjoying his reputation as America's greatest living explorer. So why was he pulled back for one more mission? The official Abao story. According to official Navy documents, Operation Highjump, officially designated the United States Navy Antarctic Developments Program 1946-1947, had several stated objectives: training personnel and testing equipment, use Antarctica as a laboratory for operating in extreme cold, preparing for potential future Arctic warfare, consolidating American territorial claims, establish presence in territories the U.S. claimed or might claim, determining the feasibility of establishing bases, assess whether permanent military installations could be maintained in Antarctica, expanding knowledge, conduct scientific research, map uncharted territory, and advance understanding of polar regions. These are reasonable objectives. They make sense in the context of the emerging Cold War, where the Soviet Union was expanding its influence and the U.S. was seeking strategic advantages. But here's what raises questions about this official story: the scale. This was the largest Antarctic expedition ever mounted, before or since. 13 ships, including an aircraft carrier, a submarine, 2 seaplane tenders, destroyers, cargo ships, and an icebreaker. Nearly 5,000 men. This wasn't a scientific expedition, it was a naval task force. The speed. The mission was organized in approximately 8 weeks. Most Antarctic expeditions require years of planning. The rush suggests either urgency or that the planning had actually started much earlier, but was kept secret. The firepower. For a scientific and training mission, the expedition was heavily armed. Multiple military aircraft, including fighters, armed ships, marine contingents, far more firepower than needed to, say, photograph coastlines or establish weather stations. The secrecy. Much of Operation Highjump was classified from the beginning. Not all of it. There was press coverage, newsreel footage, and public announcements. But significant portions of the mission were restricted, and many documents remained classified for decades. The abrupt termination. An 8-month mission that returned after 8 weeks. The official explanation was bad weather and early completion of objectives. But Antarctica is always subject to bad weather. That's why missions were planned for the Antarctic summer. And if objectives were achieved early, why the apparent urgency to leave? These inconsistencies are matters of public record. They don't require conspiracy thinking. They're simply facts that don't quite fit the official narrative. So let's examine what actually happened during Operation Highjump. Operation Highjump began on December 2nd, 1946, when the task force departed Norfolk, Virginia. The expedition was divided into 3 groups. Group 1, the Eastern Group, led by Captain George Dufek aboard the USS Pine Island. This group would focus on the eastern portion of the Antarctic coast, conducting aerial photography and exploration. Group 2, the Western Group, led by Commander Clifford M. Campbell aboard the USS Currituck. This group would operate along the western Antarctic coast with similar objectives. Group 3, the Central Group. The main force, led by Admiral Byrd aboard the command ship USS Mount Olympus, included the aircraft carrier USS Philippine Sea, the submarine USS Senate, and the majority of the task force's personnel and equipment. The mission plan called for establishing a base camp at Little America, Byrd's previous base site, conducting extensive aerial photography to map up to 1.5 million square miles, testing equipment, vehicles, and survival gear, training personnel in polar operations, investigating areas of interest identified in previous expeditions. The journey south. The task force made its way through the Pacific, stopping at various points for supplies and coordination. Press coverage was extensive initially. This was a major national project, and the media was invited to cover it. Admiral Byrd gave interviews describing the mission as a training exercise and emphasized the scientific objectives. But some of his statements were oddly ominous. In one interview, he warned that the United States needed to be prepared for the possibility of an enemy launching attacks from pole to pole using advanced aircraft. This statement is documented and verified. It appeared in Chilean press on March 5, 1947. Why would Byrd on a scientific mission be making statements about potential attacks from the poles? Arrival in Antarctica. By late December 1946 and early January 1947, the task force arrived in Antarctic waters. The initial operations proceeded as planned. Little America Base was reestablished, aircraft conducted reconnaissance and photography missions. Teams went ashore to conduct surveys and tests. The submarine explored under ice conditions. Thousands of photographs were taken. Miles of territory were mapped. The expedition appeared to be achieving its stated objectives. But then, things started going wrong. The incidents. Several documented incidents occurred during Operation Highjump, January 3, 1947, aircraft loss. A Martin PBM Mariner flying boat crashed during a photographic mission, killing 3 crew members. The official cause was listed as a sudden whiteout, causing the pilot to lose orientation and crash into the ice. Early February. Weather deterioration. Weather conditions, always harsh in Antarctica, reportedly became unexpectedly severe. Storms damaged equipment, threatened ships, and grounded aircraft. Mid-February, mysterious damage. Several aircraft returned with unexplained damage. Official reports mentioned mechanical failures and weather damage, but some crew members later reported incidents that weren't in official records: equipment failures, compass deviations, unusual radar returns. February 22, 1947, mission termination. Admiral Byrd ordered the task force to prepare for departure 6 months earlier than planned. The official reason given was weather conditions and damage to equipment, making it unsafe to continue. The retreat. The task force departed Antarctica in early March 1947. By all accounts, the retreat was hasty, equipment was left behind, some planned operations were canceled, and ships departed as quickly as conditions allowed. When the expedition returned to the United States, the reception was muted. Unlike the departure, which had been covered extensively by press, the return received relatively little attention. Admiral Byrd was immediately taken to Washington for extensive debriefing. And this is where the story gets truly strange. The debriefing. According to multiple sources, Admiral Byrd was debriefed by Pentagon officials for several hours, far longer than a routine mission report would require. The content of these debriefings was classified. Byrd gave some public statements that were carefully worded and focused on the expedition's successes, but he made no more ominous warnings about attacks from the poles. He emphasized scientific achievements and downplayed any unusual aspects of the mission. Within a few years, much of the documentation from Operation Highjump was classified. Not all of it. Public reports, photographs, and general information remained available, but specific mission logs, intelligence reports, and detailed operational records were restricted. This classification wasn't indefinite. Much has since been declassified. But the very fact of classification raises questions. What about a scientific and training mission required secrecy? What we know happened from declassified documents, official reports, and crew testimony, we can verify. The expedition was real and massive in scale. Significant territory was mapped and photographed. Training objectives were achieved regarding polar operations. Multiple incidents occurred, including aircraft losses and equipment damage. The mission was terminated early. Under circumstances the official reports don't fully explain. Post-mission debriefings were extensive and partly classified. Some mission records remain restricted even today. What we don't know. Despite decades of research and declassification, key questions remain unanswered. What specifically caused the early termination? What was discussed in Byrd's classified debriefings? Why were portions of the mission classified at all? What happened during incidents that crew members later described differently than official reports? Were any discoveries made that weren't included in public reports? These aren't conspiracy questions. They're basic, factual questions about a major military operation that the historical record doesn't adequately answer. Given the gaps in the official record and the unusual circumstances of Operation Highjump, various theories have emerged about what really happened. Let's examine them, from most mainstream to most speculative. Theory 1. Exactly what they said, training and mapping. The most straightforward explanation. Operation Highjump was exactly what the Navy said, a large-scale training and scientific expedition that achieved its objectives but was cut short due to worse-than-expected conditions. Evidence supporting this. The official mission reports describe extensive mapping and photography. Training objectives regarding cold weather operations were documented as successful. Antarctic weather is notoriously unpredictable and could justify early termination. The scale makes sense if you are training thousands of personnel for potential Arctic warfare with the Soviets. No hard evidence exists of anything else happening. Problems with this theory. Doesn't explain the classification of routine mission records. Doesn't explain Byrd's ominous statements about pole-to-pole attacks. Doesn't explain the specific urgency of the departure. Doesn't explain why an expedition planned for Antarctic summer would be surprised by weather. Doesn't explain extensive Pentagon debriefings of what should have been a routine report. Theory 2. Soviet base hunt. This theory suggests Operation Highjump was actually a search mission looking for potential Soviet installations or monitoring Soviet activity in Antarctica. Evidence supporting this. The Cold War was beginning and both superpowers were interested in strategic locations. The scale of the expedition makes more sense if searching for something specific. The military composition of the force suggests combat readiness, not just science. Intelligence concerns about Soviet expansion were real and documented. This would explain classification. Cold War operations were routinely secret problems with this theory. No evidence the Soviets had significant Antarctic presence in 1946 to 1947. Soviet Union was also demobilizing after WWII and financially strained. If a Soviet base was found, we'd expect some indication in later historical records. Doesn't explain Byrd's specific statements or the nature of the early departure. Theory 3. Nazi base hunt. One of the most persistent theories, Operation Highjump was actually a military operation to locate and neutralize secret Nazi bases established in Antarctica before or during World War II. Evidence supporting this. Germany did conduct an Antarctic expedition in 1938 to 1939. German U-boats were known to have operated in southern ocean waters during the war. Some German submarines surrendered in Argentina months after Germany's official surrender, suggesting possible South American Antarctic connections. Allied intelligence did take seriously the possibility of Nazi holdouts in remote locations. This would explain the military composition, the scale, and the classification. Several crew members later claimed the expedition encountered hostile action, though specifics varied. Problems with this theory. No German documents or testimony confirms permanent Antarctic bases. Maintaining a base in Antarctica requires massive logistical support. Hard to hide. If Nazis were found and engaged, some evidence would have surfaced by now. The German 1938 to 1939 expedition was relatively small and didn't have resources for base construction. Post-war Nazi hunting focused on South America, Middle East, and other more plausible locations. Theory 4. Technology recovery. This theory proposes the expedition was seeking advanced technology, either German secret weapons supposedly hidden in Antarctica or something else entirely. Evidence supporting this. The Nazis did develop advanced technology during the war. Some German scientists and equipment were never accounted for after the war. The expedition included technical personnel beyond what a simple mapping mission would need. Post-war American interest in acquiring German technology, Operation Paperclip, was real and documented. This would explain both the military force and the secrecy. Problems with this theory. No evidence supports German technology being transported to Antarctica. The logistics of moving advanced equipment to Antarctica during wartime would be nearly impossible. If technology was recovered, where did it go? What was done with it? Requires assuming significant Nazi Antarctic operations, for which evidence is lacking. Theory 5. The Hollow Earth UFO. Theories. At the far end of speculation are theories involving hollow Earth entrances, underground civilizations, or encounters with advanced non-human intelligence. Claims made. Admiral Byrd allegedly encountered flying saucers that disabled his aircraft. The expedition discovered entrances to underground realms. Advanced beings warned the Americans to leave Antarctica. Some of this was supposedly in Byrd's classified diary. Why these theories persist. Byrd's statements about pole-to-pole attacks are real and documented. The mystery surrounding the expedition invites exotic explanations. Some crew members gave interviews decades later claiming unusual encounters. Antarctica's remoteness and harsh conditions make it ideal for hidden secrets. Narratives. Problems with these theories. No credible evidence supports any of these claims. Byrd's supposed secret diary has never been verified as authentic. Most specific claims trace back to unreliable sources or obvious fabrications. Physics and geology don't support hollow Earth. Theories. These theories require accepting premises, alien bases, hollow Earth, not established by other evidence. Theory. 6. Resource discovery. A more mundane but plausible theory, the expedition discovered valuable mineral resources or strategic value in Antarctica, and this information was classified for economic or strategic reasons. Evidence supporting this. Antarctica is known to have significant mineral resources. Nations were positioning for future territorial claims. Resource information would have strategic value worth classifying. This would explain continued American interest in Antarctic research and presence. Fits with the stated objectives of assessing base feasibility. Problems with this theory. Resource extraction in Antarctica was and remains impractical due to conditions and international treaties. Doesn't explain the military composition or early departure. Doesn't explain Byrd's specific statements about threats. Theory 7. Classified military tests. Perhaps Operation Highjump served as cover for testing classified military equipment or weapons in a remote location where observation by foreign powers would be impossible. Evidence supporting this. Remote testing of sensitive technology was common during early Cold War. Antarctica offers isolation impossible to achieve elsewhere. Would explain classification and military composition. The submarine component could have been testing under ice operations. Aircraft could have been testing cold weather systems or equipment. Problems with this theory. Seems wasteful to send 5,000 men for what could be achieved with smaller force. Doesn't explain early termination. Tests could continue in isolated location. Most military testing was done at established proving grounds, not Antarctica. Let's step back from theories and focus on what we can actually demonstrate with evidence. Documented Fact 1. German Antarctic activity. We know for certain that Nazi Germany conducted an Antarctic expedition in 1938-1939. The German expedition photographed approximately 350,000 square kilometers of territory, claimed the territory as New Swabia for Germany, dropped swastika markers from aircraft, conducted scientific research, returned safely to Germany with data and specimens. This wasn't a secret. It was reported in German press at the time. However, the full extent of German activities remains unclear. because many German Antarctic research documents were destroyed in the war. Post-war interrogations of German polar scientists yielded little information. German Antarctic activities received limited attention from historians focused on the war itself. Documented fact. 2. Post-war. Nazi concerns. Allied intelligence after WWII was genuinely concerned about Nazi holdouts, hidden assets, and escaped war criminals. This wasn't paranoia, it was based on known escapes of high-ranking Nazis to South America, discovery of Nazi gold and assets hidden in neutral countries, German submarine movements near South America in the final days of the war, testimony from captured Germans about contingency plans. Whether any of these concerns specifically related to Antarctica is unproven, but intelligence services did investigate the possibility. Documented fact. 3. The expedition's real capabilities Operation the Highjump had capabilities far beyond what a scientific expedition required. USS Philippine Sea aircraft carrier, capable of projecting air power. USS Senate submarine, capable of under-ice operations and covert reconnaissance, multiple destroyers providing naval firepower, marine contingents for ground operations, extensive communications equipment. More than enough force to overwhelm any plausible human presence in Antarctica. This was a military task force configured for potential combat operations, not a scientific expedition. Documented fact. 4. Byrd's statements. Admiral Byrd made several statements before, during, and after the expedition that are matters of public record. Before the expedition, he described it as preparation for future possibilities and spoke of Antarctica's strategic importance. During the expedition, he gave the interview to Chilean press warning about attacks from pole to pole. After the expedition, he was much more circumspect, focusing on scientific achievements and avoiding the dramatic statements he'd made earlier. The change in tone is notable and documented. Documented fact. 5. The classifications. Portions of Operation Highjump documentation were classified beyond what standard practice would require for a non-combat scientific expedition. While much has been declassified, some materials remain restricted or have never been publicly released. Classification can indicate military activities that don't want foreign observation. Intelligence operations technology testing, discoveries with strategic implications, or simply bureaucratic overclassification common in military operations. But the fact of classification is real. Documented fact. 6. The early return. The expedition returned 6 months early. The official explanation was weather and equipment issues, but the mission was planned for Antarctic summer when weather is most favorable. Previous expeditions, including Byrd's own, dealt with similar conditions. The task force had resources to repair equipment and wait out storms. The departure appeared hurried rather than planned. Something changed the mission parameters. What can we reasonably infer? Based on documented facts, we can make some reasonable inferences. Inference 1. Operation Highjump had objectives beyond those stated publicly. The scale, composition, and classification indicate this wasn't just about mapping and training. Inference 2. The expedition encountered something unexpected. Whether this was weather, technical problems, discoveries, or something else, the mission plan changed significantly. Inference 3. Whatever happened was significant enough to require extensive Pentagon debriefing and partial classification of records. Inference 4. The Cold War context matters. 1946 to 1947 was the beginning of superpower competition, and strategic positioning included even remote locations like Antarctica. Inference 5. Post-war concerns about Nazi holdouts and hidden technology were real, even if they ultimately proved unfounded. What we cannot conclude, despite decades of research, we cannot definitively conclude that Nazi bases existed in Antarctica, that any combat or hostile encounters occurred, that advanced technology or unusual discoveries were made, that extraterrestrial or other exotic elements were involved. What specifically caused the early termination? The evidence simply doesn't support definitive conclusions on these points. The most plausible scenario. Based on available evidence, here's what seems most likely. Operation Highjump was a multi-purpose expedition with both stated mapping, training, and unstated intelligence gathering, strategic assessment objectives. The unstated objectives probably included investigating possible German Antarctic activity, assessing Antarctica's strategic value in the emerging Cold War testing equipment, and procedures for potential Arctic conflict with Soviets establishing American presence and territorial claims, possibly testing classified equipment or procedures. The expedition achieved its mapping and training objectives, but encountered conditions, weather, equipment limitations, or unforeseen difficulties that made continuing the mission either impossible or not worth the risk and expense. The mission was terminated early as a practical decision. The classification and debriefings reflected either intelligence findings, or lack thereof, regarding German activity, strategic assessments about Antarctica that had Cold War implications, or simply standard military procedure for operations that had intelligence components. This scenario requires no conspiracy, no hidden bases, no exotic technology, just a large military operation with multiple objectives, some classified, that encountered difficulties and made pragmatic decisions about risk versus reward. It's not as exciting as Nazi secret bases or flying saucer encounters, but it fits the evidence without requiring unsupported assumptions. Operation Highjump wasn't the end of American Antarctic operations. It was actually the beginning of sustained interest and presence that continues to this day. Immediate aftermath. In 1948, the U.S. launched Operation Windmill, a smaller expedition to Antarctica focused on completing photographic surveys begun during Highjump. This mission proceeded without incident and achieved its objectives. Admiral Byrd led another Antarctic expedition in 1955-1956 as part of Operation Deep Freeze, establishing permanent American research stations. This became the foundation for the U.S. Antarctic program that continues today. The pattern is clear. Whatever happened during Operation Highjump didn't deter continued American presence in Antarctica. If anything, it accelerated it. The International Antarctic Treaty. In 1959, 12 nations signed the Antarctic Treaty, which designated Antarctica as a scientific preserve, banned military operations except in support of science, prohibited nuclear testing and waste disposal, froze all territorial claims, required international cooperation and transparency. The treaty was motivated partly by the International Geophysical Year, 1957-1958, which saw unprecedented scientific cooperation in Antarctica, but it also served to de-escalate potential conflicts over Antarctic claims and resources. Interestingly, the U.S. was a key driver of this treaty. If Operation Highjump had discovered something of immense strategic value, would the U.S. have promoted an international agreement that prevented exclusive exploitation? Probably not. This suggests Operation Highjump either found nothing of great strategic importance, or what it found made international cooperation more valuable than exclusive control. What became public? Over the decades, extensive information about Operation Highjump has become public. Mission reports and summaries, thousands of photographs, crew interviews and memoirs, technical assessments, navigation logs and maps. What hasn't become public? Complete operational logs, intelligence assessments, classified portions of debriefings, some technical reports, certain communications. The pattern of declassification suggests routine operational security rather than cover-up of dramatic discoveries. Really sensitive secrets tend to stay classified indefinitely or be destroyed. Operation Highjump materials have been released gradually through normal declassification processes. Admiral Byrd's later years. After Operation Highjump, Byrd continued his distinguished career. He led Operation Deep Freeze, 1955 and 1956. He advocated for Antarctic research and international cooperation. He wrote books and gave lectures about polar exploration. He never publicly contradicted the official Operation Highjump narrative. He died in 1957, widely respected as America's greatest polar explorer. If Byrd had participated in covering up dramatic discoveries or encounters, he kept that secret until his death. More likely, the reality was less dramatic than conspiracy theories suggest. The conspiracy culture Operation Highjump has become a staple of conspiracy literature, with claims ranging from plausible to utterly fantastical. Nazi UFO bases in Antarctica, hollow Earth, entrances, secret meetings with advanced civilizations, discovery of ancient technologies, government cover-ups of world-changing discoveries. These theories share common characteristics. They rely on unprovable claims about classified information. They offer exciting narratives that feel more dramatic than mundane reality. They attribute godlike power to keep secrets to government, bureaucracies that routinely leak sensitive information. They require accepting premises not established by other evidence. The reality is probably more boring but more interesting. A large military operation with both scientific and strategic objectives that achieved some goals, encountered difficulties, and made pragmatic decisions. What Antarctica actually contains. Modern scientific research has extensively explored Antarctica, revealing no Nazi bases, secret or otherwise, no hollow Earth entrances or underground civilizations, massive ice sheets up to 3 miles thick, mountain ranges, valleys, and subglacial lakes, significant fossil evidence of ancient climates, mineral resources that remain inaccessible under current conditions and treaties, extreme environmental conditions that make permanent habitation extremely difficult, scientific value as a pristine environment for various research. If Operation Highjump discovered anything unusual, decades of subsequent research have found no trace of it. The persistence of mystery. Despite extensive information being public, Operation Highjump remains mysterious to many people. Why? Reason. 1. Gaps in the historical record invite speculation. The classified portions, the early termination, the dramatic scale, these are unusual enough to seem significant. Reason. 2. Antarctica itself is mysterious, remote, harsh, barely explored even today. It's an ideal location for hidden secrets narratives. Reason 3. The post-WWII period was full of actual secret operations. Operation Paperclip, nuclear testing, classified technology development. Governments were keeping real secrets, making people suspicious of official narratives. Reason. 4. The Nazi element adds drama. Nazis make compelling villains, and the idea of their secret bases or hidden technology is narratively satisfying. Reason. 5. Modern skepticism about government transparency. Decades of revealed secrets, Watergate, COINTELPRO, Iran-Contra, etc., have made people default to assuming official stories are incomplete or deceptive. These aren't unreasonable factors. Governments do keep secrets. Official narratives are sometimes incomplete, but the gap between incomplete information and dramatic cover-up is huge. So what can we conclude about Operation Highjump after examining the evidence, considering the theories, and understanding the context? Conclusion. 1. Something unusual, but probably not dramatic. Operation Highjump was unusual in scale and composition, suggesting objectives beyond pure science. But unusual doesn't mean evidence of secret bases or alien contact. Most likely, it reflected early Cold War strategic thinking and post-war concerns about German holdouts. Conclusion. 2. The mystery is partly bureaucratic. Much of the mystery comes from classification and incomplete public records, but government overclassification is routine, not necessarily sinister. The classification likely reflects standard operational security, not cover-up of world-changing discoveries. Conclusion. 3. Antarctic reality limits possibilities. The physical reality of Antarctica, extreme cold, logistical challenges, isolation, makes many conspiracy theories implausible. Maintaining secret bases, hiding advanced technology, or conducting covert operations there is far more difficult than conspiracy theorists assume. Conclusion. 4. Subsequent history matters. The fact that the U.S. continued Antarctic operations, promoted international cooperation, and allowed extensive scientific access suggests Operation Highjump didn't discover anything requiring indefinite secrecy or exclusive control. Conclusion. 5. We'll probably never know everything. Some questions about Operation Highjump may never be answered. Records may be lost, destroyed, or remain classified. Witnesses are dead. Memory fades. This is frustrating but normal for historical events. What Operation Highjump teaches us. Beyond the specific mystery, Operation Highjump offers lessons about history, secrets, and how we process information. Lesson 1. Context is everything. Understanding the post-war period, the demobilization, the emerging Cold War, the concerns about Nazi holdouts, explains Operation Highjump far better than exotic theories. Historical events make sense in their historical context. Lesson 2. Absence of evidence has meaning. Decades of Antarctic research have found no evidence of secret bases, hidden technology, or other dramatic elements. This absence is itself evidence that such things probably don't exist there. Lesson 3. Official narratives can be incomplete without being false. The official operation. Highjump story is probably incomplete. It had unstated intelligence and strategic objectives, but incomplete doesn't mean the stated objectives were false. Both can be true simultaneously. Lesson 4. Mystery is seductive. The human mind loves patterns, secrets, and dramatic narratives. We're drawn to mysterious events and inclined to see significance in gaps in knowledge. This is normal, but we should be aware of this tendency when evaluating evidence. Lesson 5. Some questions remain unanswered. Not every historical mystery gets solved. Sometimes evidence is insufficient. Sometimes information is lost. This is unsatisfying, but true. We have to accept uncertainty. Final thoughts. Operation Highjump was a significant event, the largest Antarctic expedition ever mounted, conducted at a critical moment in history, led by a national hero, and resulting in substantial exploration and mapping. It was also probably less dramatic than conspiracy theories suggest. Most likely, it was a multi-purpose military operation with both public and classified objectives that achieved some goals, encountered practical difficulties, and made pragmatic decisions about continuing versus terminating. The truth isn't as exciting as Nazi superweapons or alien bases, but it's more interesting in its way. A window into how military operations actually work, how strategic thinking evolved in the early Cold War, and how governments balance transparency with security. Admiral Byrd's warning about attacks from pole to pole was probably exactly what it seemed, a military officer concerned about emerging threats advocating for preparation. The Soviet Union did develop long-range bombers and missiles capable of polar routes. Byrd was right to be concerned, even if the specific Antarctic threat never materialized. The early termination was probably exactly what was claimed: weather, equipment issues, and a cost-benefit analysis concluding that further operations weren't worth the risk. In the harsh conditions of Antarctica, this is a reasonable military decision, not evidence of something sinister. The classification reflected standard operational security for a military operation with intelligence components, not a cover-up of world-changing discoveries. And the persistent mystery? That's just the nature of incomplete historical records combined with human love of a good story. Operation Highjump remains fascinating, not because it hides dramatic secrets, but